Yeah. All right. Hello, everybody. We're a little late in getting started because we're just working on a few tech issues, and yeah, it'll make sense. And so I'm gonna just kind of give it a few minutes of kind of typical office hours before we switch over to our topic for the day and our conversation for the day and our guest. But the first thing I want to say is I definitely enjoyed yesterday's class. It's really interesting to think about what it means to play these roles, and for some people to play these roles. I was absolutely fascinated by the conversation. If you didn't watch class, we had a conversation with Santa Claus, or a local gentleman who plays Santa Claus, and then one of our former who does a lot of character work and does the character of Anna from Frozen, and a couple of Belle from I don't know where Belle, I forget where Belle is from, but anyway, really fascinating, cool conversation. So as we come down to the end of the semester, but yep, so it's cool. Well, let's we're going to start today's stream. So hello. So on the Social 19 channel, we're featuring today starting a special 3-part conversation with Laurie Mulvey, Dr. Laurie Mulvey, about her work, her vision, and World in Conversation, an organization that she and I co-founded 2 decades ago, but that she now runs. And as I'm reading the news day after day, I can honestly say that I don't imagine there could be a more valuable conversation than the 3 conversations, the 3 sessions that we're going to be having. In my humble opinion, events in the thinking of many people who are kind of holding the reins of power are strikingly combative, and just disconcertingly so, and increasingly so. And I'm always saying about myself that I'm inclined to see the glass as half full, and maybe, to use another metaphor, to see the silver lining in everything that's happening around me and then happening around the world. But these days, I'm feeling an unease that's unusual, even for me. And it's an unease that I'm not able to easily shake. So here we are with Laurie Mulvey for 3 sessions about her work, because it speaks directly to this unease that I'm feeling. So Laurie and I are married. I got to start right there. And we collaborate on many things, day in and day out. And we share ideas in one form or another for probably 2 to 3 hours every single day. And January marks the 40th year in which we met, our 40-year anniversary of meeting. And then 5 months later, we fell in love, and we really fell, and we fell hard, and we fell far. And it was really a magical time to enter into this 4-decade-long friendship and marriage. Really, really a magical time. 4 decades ago, man, that's hard to really hold in my mind. But the reason for doing these 3 sessions is because there's something unique about having a public conversation like the one we're going to have. And Laurie's not seeing the questions. So there's nothing scripted about the conversation we're going to have today. And you might imagine that I've been really looking forward to seeing how she responds to my questions. So if you're watching live, then you might be interested in knowing that the second of these conversations will be Friday of this week, same time. And of course, as always, the recording will be on our channel. But let me introduce Laurie, Dr. Mulvey. Yeah. Yeah, there you are.
Hello, Sam.
Really awesome to see you. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how it is that you respond to these questions.
I feel like I'm on the hot seat. So let's
Yeah,
do
you
it.
are on the hot seat. Let's do it, man. So tell us about you, Laurie Mulvey. Like, who are you and what are you doing?
Oh my, yeah, that's not a fair question.
Okay, just who are you? How about we'll just start right there.
That's not a fair question either. But I will say that I'm actually going to be telling this story about myself later at another talk. And so right here, which is that I am the first child in both generations of my family, my mom and my dad's side. And what is interesting about that is there's many things interesting about it, but the one thing relevant to our conversation that's interesting is that I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and my grandparents, I lived with my dad's grandparents for the first part of my life, and then my mom's parents lived across the street, and they didn't like each other. And so I, from my first moments of consciousness, was in between people in conflict. And some of my first memories are calling one grandmother the name of the other grandmother and feeling the vibe of that. And so I think I am a person who has been in the middle of people in conflict all of my life. And I've been very connected to family. And so it also really matters to me that family is connected and functional and healthy and all of that. So in a way, it was my fate to be doing that kind of in-between work as my purpose.
Man, that's such a foreshadowing of everything you are and everything you do. Hey, with that in mind, we're going to talk about thinking together method. I just want to introduce that in a few minutes. But first off, just quickly, World in Conversation. What is it? What are you doing?
Well, it's complicated. World in Conversation is a center in the College of the Liberal Arts at Penn State. And it evolved from a co-curricular experience that was happening in your class, Social 119, back in the mid-90s, starting in the mid-90s, where I was helping some students to lead discussion groups for your class. First, we tested that. Did people want to do that? They did. And then could we get students to facilitate that, because we didn't have funding for grad students to do that. And so that process just got bigger and bigger as the class got bigger. So it became my work. It was just the thing I was helping out with. And then based on some things that happened on campus, we started to do a cross-campus set of dialogues with some of the best student facilitators who wanted to experiment with how to do that outside the classroom. That became World in Conversation over time. But the outside of Social 19 part started in 2002. And we've been going ever since.
And so you take really hot button topics and the student facilitators help other students to have a meaningful conversation about those topics.
Yeah. And it used to be a semester long conversation when it was just your class. And it's important to know that your class is a class called Race and Ethnic Relations, or it was back in the 90s. And at that time, having conversations about race was a pretty edgy thing to be doing. And so the cross-campus dialogues were also about race. We were asking a question, which was, what does race mean to this generation? And that's actually pretty important for how things evolved. But that was exclusively for 15 years, the conversations we were having.
So I've often said that you've either facilitated or observed far more conversations than any average human being anywhere.
Probably. I think it's pretty fair to say.
Yeah, and your thinking has been, I've watched it develop, fine-tune it and develop over the years. And so that's what these 3 sessions are about, really, the thinking of Laurie Mulvey, the vision and thinking of Laurie Mulvey. So, so listen, we're going to dedicate the third of these 3 sessions to thinking together. Okay. Mm-hmm. But just quickly, just say something about what that is, because we really want to feature that. And that's what we're going to work up to it. So what do you mean by thinking together?
Thinking together, we say it's the thinking together method, whether it's method, paradigm, model, framework. That's a theoretical conversation to have. But I've used the the term method. So thinking together is a method that has evolved from basically what I've seen over the years about what doesn't work with dialogue and addressing conflict, and addressing divides between groups of people for the most part. And so thinking together is a different way to do that. And that evolved directly out of all of these experiences and the way we could test that, and are still testing that. It's a method in development, but the paradigm or the theory or the concepts behind it are really very grounded in.
So you've been training people, you've been observing dialogues, you've been doing all sorts of things to develop over the course of 30 years. To get to this method, this model.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't know I was doing that.
Yeah,
I literally was like, I am doing what I've been asked to do, which is to help students to have these dialogues. But then it became more and more over time. And I can say a little, I guess I could just say how.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
And I would just say that at some point, at a very clear point, probably in the early 2010 area, 2008, 9, 10, we started to work internationally. And as that was happening in places like working with the Israel-Palestine conflict and Northern Ireland conflict and South Africa, meeting colleagues who were doing what I thought was comparable work and had been doing it for many years, I was asking, like, what's your method? Like, how do you do this? Because I was realizing that we were entering these conversations and facilitating these conversations, but upon what basis? Like we learned, everybody was learning skills and people were learning and students were learning and things were happening. But I kept asking myself, upon what basis are we doing our interventions? And so what I learned was that my colleagues didn't have a specific method, not that they didn't have a practice and techniques. And so that was one core part of my own development, and saying, wait a minute, what? Opening up my mind to a very big question. Yeah, and that was the beginning.
And I have watched that over time. And you went. I know probably in this conversation, I'm going to know about 25% have an idea of about 25% of what you're going to say, but the other 75%, I don't. Your mind is just, you've moved along in some directions that are really very, very cool. So yeah, thanks. I'm so happy that we get to do this. Okay. So that's the thinking together method. So we'll dig into that, but, in this book that you're working on a book, you have one book for facilitators. That's really about a 75-minute read, right?
It's basically written as a children's book for adults, because I got really tired. It explains what is a facilitator, because I think it's a very invisible profession, and then it sort of can be anything and everything and nothing at the same time. So partly it's that, but it's also a response to so many years of talking about, quote, dialogue. I now always put it in quotes, and people seeming to understand what I was talking about and realizing that no one understands what I'm talking about. And so I was like, I'm writing a children's book for adults. And so that's what that, and when you see the book, if anybody does, who's interested, you will see that it is many, images done by a very beautiful and talented artist. And so anyway, so yes, it is a children's book for adults.
Okay. To it, but okay, so listen, in this other book that you've been working on, right, you talk about the war paradigm. So let's get into this now.
Okay.
Let's just start here. What do you mean by that?
I think I mean that we are immersed, we the humans are immersed in a kind of worldview that is winners and losers, us and them, me versus you, opponents, and that it is ever present, and it shapes how we operate, how we deal with things that we disagree with, and divides. And it also, I think, limits our ability to even believe that there are ways to work with divides that are actually fruitful and meaningful and inspiring and exciting and all the things.
So, and where does the war part come in?
Us versus them, me versus you. That's it. Like everywhere we look, it is who's going to win, zero-sum game. And so that, and all of our entertainment is filled with examples of even like the hero who is going to be victorious over the evil enemy. And it's actually, when you start to pay attention to it, it is always about winners and losers. And that is just it. And then there's just a sort of meh kind of, oh, you want to play a collaboration game? You want to learn about collaboration? Oh, that's sweet. And it's like, first of all, it's fierce to figure out how to collaborate with people, but it's also healthy and robust and a lot of other things to do that. And so, but everywhere around us, the messaging is, it's me versus you, us versus them, good versus evil, justice versus injustice. It goes on, and like everything is a versus.
So we're always at war with a small W. Yeah.
And sometimes, it launches into a particular kind of violence that we can, it's usually international, right? Then we call it war.
Well, I've been thinking about just students in class, been talking about, trying to stop cheating, and it's me versus them. Like, I'm at war with cheating in my classroom.
Like you as the teacher?
Me as the teacher. Yeah. It's just like, I don't even realize that that's how I'm taking. So I don't even imagine, like, wait, what if I collaborate with them? Let me find out what they want, and then we'll work together and we'll figure it out, and then we won't have to cheat and we don't have to have that. But it's so deeply embedded in me that, of course I'm at war with students and cheating and so on. So
I don't think you're at war with students, but I understand the point is like, that's that's the go-to, that's the default.
It's just part of being a teacher. Yeah. It's part of being a teacher.
It's actually being a part of every group. So even like, for example, as generations emerge and as generations age, there's always this like generation gap. And it's like, why is it us versus them? There's people in each age group that have different experiences that so benefit from putting those experiences together. But instead, we just foolishly call it an age gap, and everyone just agrees that we're at war with each other. I'm just like, what are we doing?
And again, I want to emphasize that's a small W, right? So you could say we're in conflict with one another, but you're just using war.
Yeah, because war is so clearly about enemies fighting each other to win. Okay. Like someone has to dominate. And it's usually a just war. It's always actually a just war. And it's like, okay, but I think that's the perfect metaphor.
Yeah. Okay, so I agree with you.
This reminds me, by the way, of like every morning when we have coffee and it's like we're, having this kind of conversation where it's like, no, it's this, but what about that? Anyway.
Yeah.
This feels so familiar.
Why is it difficult to, we've kind of said this, both of us in a different way, but you said it, but why is it so difficult to see, to like recognize when this war paradigm's operating in our lives?
Well, it's not difficult to see, but it is that I think we just grow up in the soup of it. And it becomes, and there's plenty of data of our lives and stories to show us that we're in conflict with someone else or some other group or some idea. There's plenty of data about that, but it's not until you sink down into it and say, what is actually happening here? What is conflict itself? That you then can start to see that you could just turn the lens, and it's like, wait a second, all those things that we think are happening to us or that we have to fight to dominate or to win or to whatever, we might not have to do it like that. And we don't have to do it like that, but there's no one that's going to tell us any different, in particular, because what we have to, there's two things. One, the experience is very different. And when we actually move into a process that I'll call thinking together, group thinking could be another way to say it. And also it's invisible, right? What's happening isn't sexy because someone doesn't die, someone doesn't get beat up, someone doesn't lose their home. It's the opposite of that. And so we can't report on it. I mean, we can, but humans are interested in the things that we should be afraid of, right? That's what news is. And so to think of like something that didn't happen, like they didn't have a fight, these people didn't get divorced, this divide didn't occur, is like anti whatever we can report on. And I mean stories we can tell, not just journalism.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the idea of like writing, and you've done some fiction writing and storytelling. There's always the arc is where the conflict is, right? To tell a good story you got to have conflict in the story.
Well, I'm not saying conflict. One, I'm not saying it's bad. And I'm also saying that it actually is. Why do we and why have we over the years chosen to have conversations about contentious issues? Because that's where all of the juice is. That's where all of our values, the things that matter to us, the things that we see differently, the ways that we're different, that's where it all is. And so that's why it's so important to go there. So it's not about not having conflict. It's about understanding how to approach it in a way that we can actually follow its lead, follow what it's asking us to do. And I think it's asking us to build the world, build a relationship, build a bridge to a new way. And when we constantly and regularly don't know any better, which we just try to limit any discomfort that could go along with that.
And you would say we can't not have conflict. And conflict's just baked into the human condition.
Well, the way I define conflict, and
we're going to talk about conflict and collaboration in the next session, right?
But I would just say that conflict, how I've like peel it away, and conflict is literally an encounter with differences. That's it. It's not an argument. It's not anything other than you like blue and I like red, and we just realize that. That's it. That's conflict. And then the problem comes when we can't address that, and then it becomes other things, ultimately combat, right? But it's literally just an encounter with, I speak English, you speak Spanish.
Okay. So now go to the war paradigm right here with that in mind of conflict. It's part of the human condition. What's the war paradigm then?
The war paradigm is not being able to address conflict or to be able to approach the value of the differences between us. And then ultimately, we're always pushing those away until we come to a crisis of all different sorts, whether it's, your child ran away from home, or your sister will no longer talk to you, or your neighborhood, has this major division about something that's happening. Whatever it is, it's differences that do not get addressed over time. And, that's even over history.
And then we accept, because we sort of accept the war paradigm as inevitable, right? We just accept that, well, these things are just going to continue to escalate until there's a winner and then there's a loser. And that's how it's going to have to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if I had to say in simple terms, I would say yes. I think it's also important to say that when we're thinking about this, and I'm using this term war, which is immediately invoking this larger level conflict, and also governing bodies and people with extreme amounts of power, leaders, etc. I have come to see, and we won't talk about this now, but I've come to understand, I think, that when we're talking about this stuff, we actually have to separate the most of us and our lives from people who are making decisions, people who are governing, leading, and part of what actually for them is a zero-sum game. For the rest of us, it isn't a zero-sum game. And so I think it's unfortunate that there's this scale where at some point you get to a place, and we could name it and whatever, where it's like, nope, this is power politics and this is a zero-sum game, and that's why it operates like that. But we shouldn't take our cues from that level of human interaction, because it is not the same as what the vast majority of us are dealing with every single day.
Well, that's cool. That's a really cool idea. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah. It is funny, right? That we model our lives after things that really don't have nothing to do with how we're operating in the world, or very little to do anyway.
And so just to say, like, what things that we deal with every single day are just our disagreements that we have about how we live, how we operate in our neighborhood, how we're doing something at work, how, like, all of those kinds of routine ways of interacting with each other. Some routine every day, and some like, I don't like this thing that's happening in my community, or this group doesn't like this thing that's happening in our community. And that is not a zero-sum game. That is actually something that is a realistic process that can be engaged in, where people can come together and actually better address how we're going to do X thing in our community.
Wow. And the thinking together method, which is, the foundation of these three conversations, the thinking together method is what you've developed to come together and figure out how to do that, because people don't have a method for how to do it.
And it's based on it's based on a lot of things, but one of the things is based on is you and I. Like, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if you and I hadn't, in the very early part of our relationship, in the magic years, where we hadn't been completely opposed to each other in the way we were living in the world and wanting to live in the world, and there was no way out. It was you win or I win. And then there was, and we engaged in a process that I did not even know existed, where we could actually take those ways that we are and build a life together. And I would say, and that's not a one and done. That is a big process, and it is a lifetime process.
Yeah, it continues. But really that was our ability to weave these two lives and two visions together into a singular vision.
And I don't think that you do that if you don't have the conflict explicitly. Like, if you just romantically go into the sunset with somebody and never have that kind of deep, like, oh man, we are really different in this way. You're going to find those differences. But I've come to believe that you actually build the relationship based on that. And what is the relationship if it isn't scaffolding together these different things that we are? It
makes the system, whatever the system is, whether it's just two people or many people, it makes it stronger.
And
makes the system stronger.
I always say to people, in groups, which is all the time, right? Because at work, we're always in different groups. Like, we're smarter together if we're addressing the issues directly. And I would say with a facilitator or someone taking that role, because we have one brain, but if you have 5 brains, you've got different things, and it's going to be different. But if you can put those pieces together, you're going to come up with way better solutions and ideas and relationships ultimately.
Hey, so how about fear? Like, what role does fear play in all of this?
Well,
how does it enter in?
Fear, is the toxic ruiner of all things.
But I think destroyer of all things.
And yet it saves us and protects us and guides us and helps us navigate. So you have to accept it as a good thing too. But I think what fear does is feed distrust between people. And I think that's kind of almost maybe the interpersonal version of fear, is distrust that can turn into other things. But I think in order to collaborate with people, in order to engage in a process of thinking together, of facing your most oppositional experiences, views, etc., you have to trust that that people are going to be in the process with you, that they're going to listen. You have to trust that they're decent people. There's so many things that you have to trust. And all along the way, fear emerges, right? Because maybe very likely, Sam, you say something to me and I'm like, that means you're not listening to me.
Well, because we've grown up in this zero-sum game stuff. So I don't trust that that person's going to win and I'm going to lose, or they'll win more than me, than I will win. And so the fear enters right there.
Yeah. And certainly when you're in in the nature of the world that we live in, when you bring together people who are in opposing groups, right? So let's just say men and women, dealing with some issues of masculinity, femininity, whatever, you just assume that and have learned that the folks that are on the other side don't have your best interests in mind. And that's actually why there's even a problem, right? So I can't trust you to be listening fully to me. I can't trust you to want to know what's hurting me that you might even be a part of. And so there's so many reasons to distrust because of all of the things that have happened and not happened in the world around us, in terms of not many examples of people coming together using their differences and divides to create a better world, project, whatever. It's really not something you can look for.
Use the word fierce again, because people, someone might listen to you and think, oh yeah, you're just this idealistic person who's, whatever, has these idealistic goals. And I will say, no, that's not the case at all. And you're fierce. So explain what that means when you use that term. To someone who thinks you're just an idealistic noob or whatever. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I do think I have an ideal in mind. Ideal. It doesn't mean I live in a romantic world that is free of pain and struggle and all the things. Like, I don't at all. I'm very sad and heartbroken pretty much every day by the world that surrounds us. But I do have an ideal. It's sort of like having a recipe, and you're like, oh, I can make this cake, right? That's the ideal, that I actually put the ingredients together and the cake comes out. But many times you don't know well enough how to do what you're doing, and it doesn't look like it looked the picture, right? And so I'm not. So having the ideal and knowing what's possible and seeing where we keep falling and things keep breaking doesn't mean that I don't pay attention to those things, and doesn't mean that I don't recognize that we're never going to reach the ideal. But I have seen enough examples of magic happen, and it's only magic because we're not used to it, right? It's when you actually sit and watch a bee fly, you're like, oh my God, that's magic. How did those tiny little wings get this big, fat mouse of a thing flying in the air, right? That's magic. Well, that's just like this. Like, when you actually see that conflict is the source of collaboration, and collaboration is the source of conflict. But when you see that that's the source of relationship, of world building, it's magic. But it's not easy. It is fierce to engage in that process. And it is an ideal.
Okay, but let me clarify something though. But the magic, it's not magic like it just, you snap your fingers and it happens. It's like it's a step-by-step process.
Well, when I use the example of the bee, because it's like, it was created. Bees are flying around every day in the summer or whatever. And it's like, but you look at it and it seems magical. It seems unbelievable. And it's cool, right? That kind of combination to me makes it magic. And that's what I'm saying, is when you see people who are alleged enemies through a process go like, I hear what you're saying. I've never thought about it like that before. I didn't understand that. Now I see what you're saying. Just little moments like that. It's like, oh my God, that's really big.
People who prior to some kind of experience thought, oh man, I would never in a million years talk to that person or think like that person or be convinced of anything about that person or group or whatever. So listen, say a couple. The next session we're going to talk about facilitation a lot, but like we're so fierce. I've watched you facilitate, and I've watched how fierce you can be. When you're in this, making the magic happen, you're actually doing something that's very step by step and very thought. You've thought it through. You've practiced it. You've developed skills. Just say a couple words about facilitation in the context of what we're talking about.
In the context of fierce or ideal?
Yeah, the context of the conflict and watching people really work through conflicts. Like, you know, you don't just do it by your own. You don't put two groups in a room and say like, okay, go work it out.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I'll say that I'm never like whistling a happy tune while I'm in such a moment between people and conflict. So it's almost like being an EMT. Like you don't want someone to get in an accident or have some kind of emergency ever. But if you have a certain skill set or whatever, or you become purposeful in that moment, that is a crisis, right? So when I'm in a group of people, I know that any moment could be that moment that is going to be really maybe hurtful or painful or anger, whatever it is. And I don't love that, right? So what it looks like for the most part, and what makes it fierce is being, for whatever reason, willing to stay with it. And I know for myself, because of what I've seen and experienced myself, I have such a deep belief that what is happening is the surface of what's really true and decent underneath it, right? So if two people are fighting about something, right? If you get to that point, or you and I, Sam, when we get to that point, I know that we're not seeing something. We're clearly not seeing what. Not to say that we're not seeing that we're on the same page. It's just that we're not seeing the decency and the value of what each other. Yeah, and what each other is bringing to that moment. And so, so being in that with this can go somewhere. Actually, this pain or this discomfort or this whatever is it for many reasons is often how we have to get through to a different place. And oftentimes when you go through something with someone or even a group of people, there's a I don't know, like the air clears and it's like, because it's not, I don't think I've ever seen it happen where someone or two groups or two people are like, see, you were wrong all along.
Finally. No, that never happens.
We see our own part in it. We see our own limitation and then we see the other person see theirs, you know? No,
go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just think there's like beauty in that. And for most of the time, magic, because we don't usually see it, just like the little the bee wings.
And so the facilitator's job, you have this term, you use facilitator, and lots of people are using the term, but you have a very specific ways in which you use it. So the facilitator's job is the one who's in there helping to illuminate for people the thoughtfulness of another position or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times
I just want you to say something about like your job when you're in the middle of a group like that. What are you doing as a facilitator?
Well, one of the things, and I play with the idea of using conflict facilitator, one, because I don't think conflict is a problem. And I do think that we facilitators are, in the work that I do, is we're working directly with conflict. So I'll say that. But I think one simple way to say it is that as a facilitator, I'm tracking what's happening in a conversation, and it's as a way of surfacing the architecture of the group. And that architecture is going to be designed based on what is the issue that we're addressing or the project or the conflict. And so you're going to start to see emerge different groups of people who are allies, people who are opponents, people who have certain narratives about certain ways the world works, and then how they use their power in the group to make certain things happen or suppress other things or listen or not listen. So fundamentally, I think it's like starting to see the architecture of this group of people, which over time I've realized is similar no matter what the conflict is and who the people are in the group, that you're going to see some similar things.
So what you're doing is making sure that when you're knowing when some people have to listen and when some people have to talk and when others have to be held accountable, when people have to be held accountable and that sort of thing. So
and one of those things is we also talk about asymmetry between groups. Yeah. So if you literally just had two groups of people, obviously life is more complicated than that. But if you just had two groups of people, there's always going to be a group that has more authority in the conversation than the other group, right? And so that asymmetry, it means that people aren't coming at the conversation from an equal position. And so it's very much based on the world and the context and who is considered legitimate, right? And so when you're working with that, there's a lot of paradox. Like sometimes the people that are more willing to talk have to be asked to listen, and it feels wrong sometimes, sometimes it's like, wait, but we're the ones that should, and it's like, actually. So anyway, the point is you're looking for ways to balance out the conversations to make it more, it is one simple way of saying, to make it more functional.
Yeah. And I would like to use the term magical here, having observed you, not a lot, actually. I don't get a lot of opportunities to observe you, but when I do, but yet it's not magical. It's just skills. You just have these skills, and you teach other people these skills, and it's really profound, man. And it's very cool. It's very cool to watch. So,
I'm looking at this. I just want to put on our website and this might go away soon, but I'll just say it now. But we have some testimonials, and there's one. Oops, it just shifted. There's one from a former student, alum, who actually was a staff member for a little bit of time and was one of our original, what then was the Race Relations Project people. I want to read the quote because he says, "What we do is like a magic trick because people don't expect us to be able to smoothly provide avenues for solutions." And so
that's cool.
So it's not only me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of solutions, here we go. So there's a couple of solutions that I've been wanting to ask you about this that people come up with, right? And the one is compromise and the other is empathy. Okay. And you're not talking about, like, explain what you mean by compromise, because you don't mean compromise in the way that a lot of people think about it, right?
Well, what's your question about it, though?
Well, compromise seems to me the way most people use it is that, well, we compromise. We give up something. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to give up. Mm-hmm. But what we don't see is that, wait, hang on, you're going to give up, but you give up, but the other persons or the other group's going to have to give up too. And therefore you're gaining something. And what we forget is the gain part, what we gain from compromise.
I think, but I think I am often saying I'm not interested in compromise because compromise itself, just like you described, feels very transactional, just like you described, right? You give me this, I give you that. And I'm going to try to give you the thing that I least value. And I know that you're going to do the same thing. So there's already just a slightly manipulative part of it, even though I think people, and we all do that with the best intentions. And actually, I think that's true for all of these things. Everything we do is with the best intentions. And I know when someone is in a situation and they say something and they think, oh, that hurts somebody's feelings, or, ooh, that might upset someone, they stop going down that path because they don't want to hurt somebody, or they don't want to make something awkward. Like, this is kind of our best selves that are trying to make things okay for each other. So I always think that the intention is a good intention. Similarly with compromise, like, all right, we can have this for dinner tonight and that tomorrow night, right? I mean, that's not a great example of compromise, but you get the idea is that's how it feels. But when we're dealing with these really important things, pro-life, pro-choice, for example, compromise is a really strange thing. Like, it doesn't, what kind of compromise are you going to make? So I'm interested in transformation. So how do we take those two positions and transform them into something else, a third way? What is the third force? And this is a sacred geometry, kind of a metaphysical set of ideas when we talk about opposites coming together to create a third force. And that is what, that's why for me, compromise is just, okay, that's just a temporary fix, and it's for small things, right? But that's not the basis of collaboration. Compromise is not the basis of collaboration.
But when you see it like that, the way we typically see it, then it connects to the war paradigm. It connects to like a sporting event or a sporting victory. It doesn't matter if one team wins 28-27 or 28-0. The point is they won. And so it's just winners and losers. And you're saying what you want is a third way and transformative way.
Yeah. And I'm not also saying that competition, which we have all around us also is a bad thing and should be removed from the universe. Obviously, humans enjoy challenges but we have to understand where it fits and where it's actually undermining what we do.
Yeah. And so the vision you have, I mean, I don't know why, if people, when you think about it, like we could make our system stronger. We could think better together. We could improve life in so many different ways by working together, thinking together, acting together.
And first of all, it definitely takes more time, right?
Yeah.
And that's a thing that is always a consideration. At the same time, it when you say we got to collaborate, it's just like, ugh, God, what does that mean? It just means I have to take more time to do something I could have just finished on my own or with these two other people who I know work well with me, right?
Yeah. And if I have to bring in those other ideas, it's gonna just mess everything up.
And so again, this is where I say there has to be so many of these cases, like you need a facilitator. Like the humans always try to take all this on themselves, but especially when you have troubled working relationships, you actually need other people to help the process, right? To guide the process. But wait, what was I saying to you about?
Well,
compromise. No, we went from compromise to competition to what was the next thing?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to go in.
I know. Collaboration. Even though it takes more time, what I've also seen is that when people are truly and sincerely in a collaborative process, not a fake process, like, oh, our team's going to do this, but really it's two people that made all the decisions for everybody else and everyone else just goes along with it. Or doesn't, but just pretends to. That is not actually a good use of time or resources. And when people are sincerely part of the process of creating the thing, creating the policy, the way the project's going to go, the vision, they're in it, and it's exciting, and it feels good to have a part in a project. And so that's when you think, oh, collaboration. That's because you're not in a real collaboration.
Yeah.
Because real collaboration is dynamic.
It's like all of us who've ever been in a group where everybody's really participating and there's no one singular leader and it's dynamic and people are engaging and people say, wow, like that was amazing. And I really enjoyed myself. But probably what happened was some person in the group, or either they just got lucky, or some person in the group was sort of mimicking or playing the role of a facilitator in some way to move things along.
Either of those could be true. And it's a rare occurrence when it happens like that. And it's a great experience, but we just don't have enough of those experiences. And I think we unfortunately think that it's just like the stars aligned in some way and that happened, which is probably true in the circumstance. But if you understand how groups work, we can make that possible more often.
Yeah. Always, actually, almost always you can make it happen. Hey, so you've said that the way we think about it, it generally will end up being a truce and not a transformation. Like you don't want a truce. What's the problem with just having a truce?
Well, sometimes a truce is necessary, right? You just got to stop the bleeding in order to do the next thing. So I also don't think that any of these things should be stamped out of human life, but to only be recognized as part of the process and not the be all and end all, right? It's like put the Band-Aid on for right now while we go to the emergency room to get stitches, de-escalate the moment, put your kids in timeout, and then later on or another day, we're going to come back and we're going to, work with whatever is going on. It doesn't, and that's actually really valuable because you can't necessarily do the best work when you're in the crisis, where you're in the most inflamed moments of disagreement or pain, or, you just can't often.
Hey, so really quick, here's another question that just came to my mind. How does compromise, how's it just maintain our different sides? Like, how's it just keep us stuck in the...
Well, it doesn't require me to do anything different, to see anything different. I just stay with like what I want and what I'm willing to give up in order to get what I want. And what you're willing to give up for me to get what I want. And for me to at least feel like, all right, well, you got something too, but that's not what I wanted. So yeah, it's talk about meh. It's a very meh process, and we probably all recognize it in our lives, and then you get to the point where you're like, that compromise, I mean, if you could narrate what's going on when you have like a moment of like explosion between you and a loved one or coworker, where all of a sudden all this stuff comes out, but it's like all these momentary compromises. And often we make those compromises without actually even engaging in a process, right? I'm just like, all right, it's not that big of a deal for me if I have to work tonight and she doesn't, or he doesn't, or like, yeah, I did it last week, but no big deal, blah, blah, blah. You do all these, okay, I can do that, no big deal. And then there's a point where you're like, now it's a deal, right? But you were doing it out of goodness, right? Because you think, why should I make a big deal of it? And we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot by thinking, I don't want to make a big deal of it. And I have like so many things that are small deals could be addressed at the small deal level, and they'll get to the big deal level where now I'm just never going to talk to you again.
What happens in a workplace, and then it escalates to HR or whatever, and then it's like, oh my God, then the rules and the policies and everything starts.
Or marriage, right? So like, how many times I can think of, and I can see your face, Sam, when you're just like, you don't realize, Laurie, all of the times where I'm actually not bringing this to you, or I'm not asking you for this, or I've taken care of this thing on my own. And it's like, but I don't see that. And so I can't even get to appreciate it along the way, right? And so it's like your goodness that is making that possible, but then it's like, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. That's a really good example. Hey, there's a second solution, so to speak. I mentioned it, empathy, that people use. It's like it's a cultural buzzword now, and you, as one of the parents of radical empathy, should have something to say about this. But like empathy, I think you've said that empathy doesn't get us thinking together, right? It's like empathy alone by itself, right? What do you see?
Well, I think what I have seen directly is that empathy is, and by the way, you and I have been talking about this since the what is it, the aughts, the 2002 to 8 or to 9, right? Like, because we did a presentation actually on this in that era where we talked about the limits of empathy. And so anyway, it's been a long time conversation. Like, we didn't just wake up to this. But what I realized in the process of it all was that empathy has been seen as the goal, and it's not the goal. It's actually just part of a process. And empathy is valuable. Like, when I'm just like, oh man, when X person comes to school and they have a wheelchair and, this is some of the things they encounter, like, that's really valuable for me to see that, when I opened the door for you at this moment and you were mad about it, it actually had a whole history before it. I'm making that up. So that's helpful, that empathy that can like de-escalate a moment or just provide a little more softness to the responses because you understand something. That's awesome. But I think over the recent era, we've substituted that as the goal. Like, once I just understand you, then it'll all be well. Well, first of all, you'll only have a part insight into someone else's experience, and then you've got to live your own life. You can't live someone else's life, right? And that, like, we can't be part who we are because we now understand somebody else. We still have to live as ourselves. And so I think we all know that we've gotten ourselves into a corner where that's just not the goal. So great, and lubrication for the process, but not the goal.
And then one of these things that I see is like kind of with empathy, it's always about learning about the other person, understand the other person, what's interesting about them, but it never really enters into the conversation. We'll also get them to understand who you are. Empathy always feels like it's one way.
It does, and I think what I've also
the way we talk about it. I mean the way it's discussed. It makes sense that people would say like, yeah, I don't like empathy. I don't just want to learn about other people.
Well, right, and because also we, like you said, we kind of we've selected the groups that deserve empathy, if you will. And it makes, typically we've talked about marginalized groups of people because the idea is we don't see. We're not shown the life of someone who's in a marginalized group of some sort enough to be able to understand what their life is. But the other side of it is that even the groups that we do see in some way, we actually don't see their real lives, and so we don't understand them either. And so the fact,
or that it got at some point it gets to the place where those are the only groups that we see, the ones that somehow we've decided need empathy.
Right, and that's why we would get stuck in only being a one, we'll call it a one-way street. Yeah. But there was something you turned me toward.
Yeah. The idea that, oh my gosh, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So that you were saying the marginalized groups.
That was just to like the empathy piece to kind of close out the empathy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh damn! I'm okay. Just you can reset.
Yeah, okay, let's reset here. So,
although I know Elijah's listening, so maybe he knows where we were.
Yeah,
and he can chat to us about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to go to this because this idea that I know what you were saying. You were saying we don't actually see the full lives of the people we've discovered we need to empathize with. We only see a portion of their lives. We don't see them as full human. We're not really empathizing. Yeah.
Yeah. What I was going to say, so that's about like understanding the logic of how we got to empathy being important. But what's happened to me over the years as somebody who was watching that process happen, seeing it unfold in many, many groups between people, but also realizing that it wasn't leading us to solve social problems. It was actually leading us into more silos, and not even forget social media, pre-social media. It was like, oh, now I'm for this other group that I know that I didn't used to understand, or that something, but that's it. We're not solving the problems. And so for me, the work of the Thinking Together method is about fundamentally addressing problems or building policies, projects, etc., with the valuable differences between people. So whatever the things over the years that we were addressing, whether it's race, gender, climate issues, the government, all the different things, we're not solving them by understanding you better, right? And so that's where we have to solve things in groups. We can't just somehow come to like each other. Please do that. And that does happen, actually. But that's not the goal because it's not doing anything. This is just me. This is what I observed in the world from my, position.
And it can't really do anything because that's not what it's about. Yeah. It's not.
Well,
there's no method. Method.
But the idea was the more that people understand people that are different from them, then the more likely we are to live in the social world in ways that they're more empathic and therefore they're more functional. But that thing didn't work. That was an idea. Talk about an ideal. That was an ideal that actually doesn't have a lot of legs underneath it.
About 20 years ago, I remember sitting at our dining room table and you saying, you know what, I really want to understand. I want to have a window into the lives of really wealthy people. It's like, we never understand them. So I just have no idea. I make all these aspersions and thoughts about who really, really wealthy people are, but I have absolutely no idea. And I'm thinking about, wow, how fascinating it is that we're to empathize with people who are the opposite of that. But how can you, if you have no idea whatsoever about the whole range of the population, we make all these assumptions about people.
Yeah. I think one of the things, I mean, that's a really good example because it's intuitively the opposite of a marginalized group of people that, that we've in previous era, we've been like, that's who we should focus on and we should learn about. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, just like you're saying, I came to this realization that there's so many people that we don't know things about. And one of the things is like understanding that if you're somebody who is in the very elite and wealthy class, you're going to have very different understanding of relationships and friendships than if you are someone like me, right? Because when I meet people, I don't think they want anything from me, right? I don't think like they're like, oh, Laurie has a lot of money. Maybe she'll share some of it with me. Maybe she'll support my organization. Maybe she'll this, maybe she'll that. And if you're somebody who has a lot of means and that's what you're thinking all the time, that is a very different cultural context, right? Yeah. And if we don't understand that about someone from that class or people from that class, how do we understand how to interact with each other? The
foundation of who they are and how to interact with them.
And even for me, more importantly, how to build the world together, right? And I don't think those things can't be forgotten. They have to be baked in to how we operate together. But anyway, the point is, like, if you don't think that group of people is worth empathy, i.e. understanding what the world is like from their perspective, I think we miss the point of empathy. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
We miss so much. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Now that's what makes, living with you so fascinating because, I offer a certain window into the world, but you offer a different window into the world is equally as fascinating.
No, you definitely offer a different window into the world than I have, and I rely on it actually. World, the worlds that come from data. Did you know that 25% of people, blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, no, I didn't. And then did you know that Bangladeshis, blah, 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 blah? Nope, never heard of that.
Hey, so thinking about this, this idea of empathy, right? This, which I've defined as just really, if you ever have the thought, hey, I think it would be really interesting to learn more about this person or that person. That means you're empathizing. That's all it is right there. That's step one. And it's the first step for us to be able to think together. Because you got to be curious about what other people are about. So
you have to. For some reason, I just felt like bringing this up because you and I had a conversation on Thanksgiving with my brother Rick and nephew Sam about pump stations and sewage treatment plants. Like, who knew? That's what I was going to say next. Right. And all of the people that, including them, do work and put the electric in these things and make sure they work. And we learned of the story where they turned on this pump, this sewage pump in a town close to where I grew up, and it was faulty. And some guy had to stand with his finger in his
hand over it,
while all the sewage was spewing out over him until somebody could go and get the part that they needed to fix the thing, right? And so there's a guy or anybody like that person who does that work and lots of other work like it, that it's like, if you don't understand what this person is doing, one, for all of us, but two, just what's it like to walk in that person's shoes and what do they see in the world that you don't see? I mean, that's
pretty fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So what is somebody who has, extraordinary wealth? How do they walk through the world? How does somebody who's being in the moment where they can put their hand in a sewage pipe and have sewage spewing all over them and for the rest of our benefits until somebody comes and fixes it? That's another. Anyway, there's so many dimensions of humans that when you think of how much intelligence we have at our fingertips and how little of it we access, that is to me what is so striking.
That's that's a really, really good example. Hey, how about, so I want to go back as a segue to the next session which we're going to have on conflict and collaboration and facilitators, right? I really want to dig into we're going to dig into the ins and outs of facilitation. But where do facilitators fit in right here in this conversation that we're having?
Facilitators are, conflict facilitators are a type of bridge person. My word for just saying that there are people who can be trained, but also people who are built in such a way that they walk in the in-between space, that invisible space between people, between relationships, between groups. And there is so much that's happening between people and between groups. And a facilitator, a conflict facilitator, in my terms, is the person that is making moves to address and to, in ways, transform the things that are happening between people that are invisible to most of us. And so they're basically monitoring, tracking, and intervening in that invisible process between people in order to make the relationships and the thinking then more functional and actually lead them to the ability to think together.
That's what makes... Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. No, this is what makes having a facilitated conversation really valuable, because there's someone there who's holding things and moving it forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, you can't be a participant and a facilitator at the same time. I mean, I think probably the best facilitators feel more like participants in a group, but you're never a participant. It's not about what you think and what you want to happen. You are there to serve the group organism. And so your job is to serve the group organism, and that cannot happen when you are in the group saying, this is what I think should happen, this is what I disagree with that, or I want this, or I feel that it's just two completely different things. And so when you have somebody that's there managing the mechanics of a group, it is a completely different experience. And so even our students who are young in that process of becoming a group, they, just by their presence, they set up a different situation. And so people in a group actually respond differently because those people are, quote, in charge. It sets up a structure that helps people to actually participate. And I think it's hard sometimes to put into words the difference between being a participant and being a facilitator, because most people think you can be both. And you absolutely can't.
Yeah.
And I learned this from my beloved siblings. Every time we get into a disagreement and I'm just like, kind of go into my like, blah, blah, blah. And in some wordless way, they're like, you're in it with us. You're in the thick of it. You are not facilitating.
Yeah. You can't do that. And don't even try. It just gets more annoying. Yeah, no, that's very cool. And I just want to throw out here that your work, I mean, it both, first off in the Social 118 class early on, it continues on, but then establishing what was the Race Relations Project and now World in Conversation, means you have thousands of people out there in the world who you've trained to facilitate, to do this, which is, it's pretty cool.
And I think what most of them, I think, leave their time at Penn State or with World in Conversation, what they leave with more than anything is a shift in mindset. And what that means is they start to realize that it's not about what side am I on and what do I think is right or wrong. They actually start to see what's in between this side and that side. And that mindset shift is what I hear people kind of report on, that they're always looking for, when they hear a story or they have somebody tells them something, or there's two people that are in conflict, they're always looking for the nuance of it, the complexity of it, the other side. So, I mean, you can certainly learn skills of active listening and asking questions in a different way, but it's not until you have this mindset shift that you can actually operate and I would truly facilitate in a way that can transform conflict, because you will be saying, they're not allowed to say that. I cannot accept when someone says this or believes that or wants, like, so your own issues will, your own sense of morality and justice will get in the way of the realization that there is another, or there is a particular justice and morality that is being worked through in this moment, and that you have a really important role in helping to get to.
Because it means we have to give up the idea that ours is the most important moral system, or the best one, or the only one that should be allowed, or whatever it is.
And that's,
I will say,
that in itself is just a controversial thought for many people.
Oh my God. Yeah. To the activist oriented win-lose paradigm people, right?
To many things. But I just want to say one other thing. Because it's over the years, what I've seen is that people who are born into both, which is typically multiracial young people who are like, I'm both this and this, but they have to pick. We have this typical thing in human life where you have to pick a team. And so you're black, but you grew up in you pick your white side or you pick your black side, but you can't, very few people can be like, I'm both, guys. Guess what? I'm both.
And hold that.
Right. But those are the people over the years, and that's just a race example. There's many other examples. I'm actually an example of this, but in a different way. But where you're just like, there is no one or the other, because all of that is in me. Those people who see that already, they can move into this conflict facilitator role in such a powerful way, because it's like, obviously it's not one or the other, because both live in me. Yeah. And you want to force people like me to pick one, and that's foolish. It's ridiculous, because it's not true, right? And so
it's been cool to watch you develop this paradigm and have my world transformed as a result of this paradigm that you've been working on as long as I've known you, and I've watched you, man. I'm going to use the word fierce again in alignment with your Aries moon. But I'm going to say just the fierce way in which you will consider ideas and perspectives that I would imagine you would never consider, or you would have never considered. Now I'm just ready for anything, because you just will bring something onto the table. And it's so intellectually meaningful for me. I always feel smarter whenever you bring something else on the table that I wouldn't imagine myself considering, over the years. I feel so much smarter, just so much more prepared.
That's the thing, right? Yeah. Thinking together, we're smarter together. Like you and I have had like so many clashes of ideas. And then as a result, we build something that we both have a bigger view. And that's not for everybody, right? Like this is one thing to do in the world that has a purpose and a component of it to serve. There's a lot to be said about having a very singular focus and a very clear mission, and you're not going to be stopped from that mission for whatever it is: justice, peace, whatever, changes in food, whatever it is. Like that is not in contrast to what we're saying. These are all things that, there is a contrast, but it's not in opposition to what we're talking about today. This is a method, and it has a purpose, and it lives in a world that actually doesn't know that there are ways to move through things that don't just have to be a fight. And it would benefit us to know when we have to fight, when we have to defend something, and when we can collaborate. And I think there's lots more times when we can collaborate than any of us ever know. And it starts in our families. It may end in our families. And
I think that's where like the people would see you as, might imagine you to be kind of like soft or unrealistic or whatever, because they don't realize like what you just said. Sometimes you have to fight, right? Like like that's part of this for you. Like it's not just bend over and accept everything, that just bow to each person as you see them. Like sometimes you fight, man, you're in it. This is
like, my mom's in the hospital and she's not getting attention, the proper care. I'm absolutely going to go and advocate for her to get what she needs, right? Like that. I'm not going to just sit and wait or just be like, what do you think? What blah, blah, blah. Or what, I mean, life is a razor's edge between so many different things. And it just so happens that for me, this realm of human collaboration and talking, where we can actually do some things with our words and our relationships, is a place where I can see, and I have learned to see, so much potential. And that doesn't mean it's the only thing to do or only way to be. It just means there's some people we could benefit from doing more of it.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Dr. Mulvey. I very much appreciate the conversation, and awesome conversation, actually. So really, thank you. This is very cool.
Thanks for the questions. I love to be asked questions.
I do indeed. Yeah. So we're going to shift a little bit and take some questions from the stream.
Okay. More questions.
So one person just when we were talking about compromise, Ziesendorf said that compromise is a euphemism for concessions. Is what? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the felt experience. And again, compromise at levels of, nation states and whatever is a different thing than between humans directly. But also, we sometimes have to, de-escalate something in order to make room for something else at that level. But yeah, I think that's a nice way to say that.
Also, Ziesendorf said this other thing quite a while ago, actually, but we bring our thoughts together, and if we can compromise, we can learn one another's perspectives on some topic or some issue or some problem, right? So, but you can't do that if you don't bring your thoughts together, right? I mean, this is really what you're talking about.
I actually think we can talk about this tomorrow, the next time, but I actually think that when we think about being a participant in a process like this, I actually think we have to we have to get better at saying where we stand. And I don't mean that like, what's our opinion? Because in this method, we're always asking people, what do they see? And I think we'll say more about it, but I think we have to get better at communicating what we know that actually other people don't know. And that's really different than I need to know what your life is. It's like, I actually think we have to get better at saying what we know or what we think we know. And that can, that'll be worked through in a conversation, but we all know some things that I think we've sort of learned over the decades to like push aside while we listen to somebody else. And I think we actually have to listen to each other, but we can't do it if we don't actually know what we're seeing. And it's really difficult right now in this very messy, chaotic world of information coming at us at all levels. I know that that's a big part of the work that I have to do right now within a group of people addressing so much.
And one thing you've been saying for quite a while, and is being said, is that for quite a number of decades, we've been a certain segment of the population, people who identify as more conservative, have been told, like, look, it doesn't matter what you think. We don't care what you think. You need to think about it like this. And then no one really knows what people think, until like you don't really know. Like,
well, I mean, I think this is actually what I'm talking about has a lot to do with whatever the version of any education system is that we have going forward. I think these should be the agenda points, which is we have to educate people in many different perspectives so that they're conversant with different perspectives and people understand, just to use the liberal conservative, people understand what is it to be liberal, what is it to be conservative. And obviously that's all changing anyway, but that it actually is that we have to learn in this conversational kind of way, because there's new world order, but keep going. But I think it's the job of education as an institution to do that quite differently.
Yeah. Okay, here's another one. Axel in Germany said, in France and Germany, the people have been fighting for 250 years. But after World War II, like there was very much a real peace by visiting one another and sending young people to the other nations. So French youth going to Germany and German youth going to France. And it really established like a real peace,
Absolutely. It's absolutely 100%.
So like that, it's inevitable though, that you would say. Yeah.
Well, it's humanizing. Like we learned this in our dialogue work with civilians in Afghanistan and NATO cadets about bringing them together, pre-deployment, and the humanizing element of that, of realizing, wait a second, we are very much alike. Clearly we have all kinds of cultural differences and whatever, but that humanizing aspect and it's what I always say, seeing the decency in other people. And I think that is what kind of has happened as the world has gotten smaller through the internet. There's so many people that have built relationships in so many different and have created so many different subcultures. And we don't like a lot of that, actually, is what we're coming to. But that is absolutely what happens when people move into each other's worlds.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's a question from Vibe Tornado Gameplay. All right. First question is, what does that mean? How'd you come up with that? But how do we as a society go from conflict to compromise, even when compromise seems impossible or improbable?
I actually think we compromise all the time. And I really,
this is going to be our next conversation, by the way, where you're going to dig into this, but just
I actually think we need to go from conflict to collaboration. And the question, and it's a really big question. So I think this is probably like maybe what Vibe Tornado is hitting on, is like literally how. And I think, we have ideas about that, but it really just the how to bring more people into a process or that would actually go from conflict to collaboration is necessary. I wish more people would ask that question.
Okay, Guai10 says, there's generally going to be a leader in a group, and the leader's role might shift to other people, but be a leader. So can you just say something about that?
Yeah, I would say that there often is a leader in a group, definitely. That's part of the structure of a group. But I say because a facilitator will oftentimes have to oppose the leader. So a facilitator will realize quickly to what degree is that leadership functional and to what degree is that leadership becoming toxic, right? Because it's really easy for people to follow, especially, somebody who is smart and charismatic and a really nice person. Everybody likes them. It's suddenly like whatever they say is going to be like, okay, we can accept that, which is great on one hand. But what about the blind spots that they have? I see this all the time. Their blind spots then become the group's blind spots because you want to be with the cool guys or whomever, right? And so, that's a really interesting realm to talk about, because the facilitator is in some way a different kind of leader, and so sometimes has to undermine the natural leadership. But I think when a group is working well and a facilitator is working well, that the group leadership is supportive of what the facilitator is trying to help happen. Yeah. But sometimes it isn't, because somebody really likes being king or queen, and then you're in a
if somebody likes it, they enjoy it, and so you work with that. Hey, by the way, AZ responded to something and just said, regardless, like fairness isn't the goal of competition. If it was, we'd just call it a tie before the competition starts. So it's not about fairness, right?
No, competition is based on fairness, and we're very upset when it's not a fair competition. And I think clearly some of the issues with trans people have hit at that very core of, we want competition among equals. Otherwise, it's not a competition. So I do think that there's something about when we are in a competition, we want to know that the rules are everybody's being treated in the same way. So I think that's an interesting realm to explore.
Hey, Stephen from the UK says that he wishes that you could negotiate a Ukraine deal so his friend isn't suffering anymore.
I wish I could be part of something like
Laurie was in Ukraine, actually, went over. She served on a panel for women soldiers. Was it women soldiers?
It was it NATO? No, it wasn't.
But soldiers in Ukraine. It was a NATO conference in Kyiv. Yeah.
And it was about women in war and what that meant. And we had women soldiers there talking about their experience. This was before that became aware of a couple years ago. This was the beginnings of that. So yeah, it was deep.
Man. So Vibe Tornado gameplay, another comment, and see if you have a thought about this. Empathy it's an interesting concept because we as humans are capable of empathy, but some have a harder time learning empathy because of their own experiences.
Yeah, I think that's true. Definitely. I think with all of these things, it's clear that we are built differently. And even at the level of like some people, I was just saying this to someone the other day, that they're so good at putting what they experience into words, and many people are not good at that. And so what then happens is we say things that don't actually communicate what we mean, and then that creates, all these other layers of things. So I do think for some people are just like, they become the other person, like their empathy meter is just so open, whatever you want to call it. And other people are just like, this is me and that's you. And that's that, And so, and I think that all is to be honored, and like, these are different superpowers and limits, that we all have a mix of.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. It's so true. Hey, Ziesendorf also mentioned that I'm like the facilitator in Social 19, that rarely do I participate as an in-group. You are clapping because I am
you learned to be a facilitator. I mean, I did. Tell you to be one, but
it took me many years.
Yeah. Sam used to just stand up and tell people things, which was awesome. People actually like hearing Sam tell them things like that. I know most people don't know that who watch you now in your class, but like, you were very successful as a teacher over many years doing that, probably because you were also a stand-up comedian in your early life. And so you made it fun. But yeah, I mean, I clap because that is an amazing development. And Sam really does showcase some parts of facilitation and what can come forward in people when they're just asked questions. Whether they've thought about it or not. We're all very intelligent, and it's pretty cool to see.
That I talk about how interesting it is to listen to students, that they really have a lot to say. But I got that from you. I mean, that is directly from your mouth. It's like, no, I sit in these circles and I listen to people talk, and they have so many interesting ideas once they start to share. Than the quiet person or the person that doesn't really want to talk. And so all of that I got from you. I got from watching you and finally saying, okay, let me jump off the deep end here. Yeah. So that is nice. Okay, Laurie Lynn, do you want to take a couple more?
Yeah, I actually now just looked and saw, is conflict in a society an indicator of a healthy society? By the way, I wasn't looking at the chat, so just so everybody, sorry, I'm not responding directly to it, but I did just see that. And I think this makes me want to say one of the things that I've said about the United States in recent years, because as I travel to other places, Korea being one of those places that is a very different society than the United States, a very monocultural society versus a very multicultural society. And it's just cool to see the differences, not the good or bad, but just like differences. And anyways, this is just one example of a place that I've traveled. And I actually, over many years of traveling, I actually have, the people look at the United States like, oh my God, they have these issues with race and culture and blah, blah, blah. And look, they're crazy. They're losing it. And while, as somebody who's been in that realm and those conversations for all of my adult life, I can tell, I know the nuttiness of it and the unresolved and painful parts of all of that. But I do think that because that conflict, all those conflicts became and are so explicit, that we actually had the opportunity, I say had because I'm going now, but had the opportunity to get to a new place. And I think we already have, but I do think that to me, it's an example of how when conflicts become explicit, they can then move and become something else. Right. And so, there's lots of nuances to that, but I do think that there is something about that. I mean, it is a healthy family, right? If you have a family that has no conflict, and then you have a family that has the ability to disagree with each other, I think you might think that there's a little more dynamic health in the one that can actually disagree. I think it probably feels better to be in that space. I mean, not always, but.
And the problem is when the conflict slides into combat, and we're going to talk about that in our next conversation. But I keep saying this, all the things we're going to talk about.
I'm really glad you're doing that, Sam, because it helps me to take it off the table, and I always get overwhelmed by how many different rabbit holes we could go in. So I'm really happy you're doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I think we can Stephen asked this question, and I just don't know that. Well, you know what? Let me ask it, because maybe you've got
I think I do, actually.
The one about Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The Russia-Ukraine conflict. Yeah.
Yeah. Very humbly, I would, again, because there are other things happening at world levels that I think I and most of us don't have access to in terms of what are the stakes. But all I will say is that you can never have a peace deal that is pro either side. Like if it's just pro one side, it's not going to be a peace deal. And it may be a temporary de-escalation where we can reassess, and that would be ideal. If that's the only way we can get to ceasefire, I can see a value in that, but I don't think you have a peace deal if you have a pro any side, because the other side will not be happy and you will not have peace. I mean, it's that simple, I think. But I think stopping the violence is a really important piece. And again, me not having access to all the stakes and all the players and all of that, like I say that very humbly, but I think we see it over history.
And cognitive dissonance 1773 says, okay, you solved that one today, but the next one is in Israel. You got to solve that one.
Again, I learned, just to say, I feel like I've learned the distinction between the people and the leadership and like all the things that happen differently at that level through my work with the Israel-Palestine conflict, because I've always come to like the Israelis and Palestinians can live together. Like they could do that, but there's too many other things at stake, and I don't understand them. I don't know them, but I just know that it's just like the France-Germany example. You just get people together and they have way more in common and way more reason to trade and to work together than they do to like destroy each other's lives. So yeah.
No, you saw that. And I will say the thing that's so fascinating about you, learning from you is how is how like grounded your ideas are in this realm. There's nothing wishy-washy, there's nothing like soft, there's nothing up here in the air about it. It's so grounded in reality, in the day-to-day.
And I just want to say, when you say that, it makes me think of like in particular, when I think of Israeli and Palestinians, and obviously there's always bad actors, right? And there's always people that want more than they should have and all of that. But just in general, I saw people, how good they felt when they realized that the person on the other side wasn't their enemy. Like that's real for people. And I'm thinking of one particular example, which was a really intense example where I had the opportunity to speak to a young woman who was the daughter of a Hamas leader. This was 15 years ago, okay? But of a Hamas leader who had been killed by the IDF. And anyway, I got to have a long conversation with her, and what we came to was that she did not believe that there was anyone within the state of Israel who cared about Palestinians. And I was like, oh my God, I could line up, 15 people tomorrow that would be able, you would see. And so her world was set up in such a way that she could not see that there was any person who was Israeli who cared about her well-being. And by the end of that conversation, she was like, her eyes opened. Like she was like, my God, there are people. And we learned later, because she was, very concerned about the kind of work we were doing with dialogue. We learned later from somebody else in a different program how much like she had been like, okay, she changed something about how she was thinking about it as a result of that. But it was like, here's this person thinking that every Israeli is against her, and all it took, right? But was literally a deep conversation of being like, you just aren't seeing that. And it was, so to me, what I'm saying about, for example, folks living in that conflict is just like any other people, if they can live together, they can live together. But there's lots of reasons why that's not happening.
Yeah. That's fierce, by the way. I remember watching that conversation happen from across the room. It was a big conference room and you were seated on a couch. And I remember watching that. And I remember watching how intensely focused the two of you were, and how almost not animated, but just how intensely focused the two of you were, and how there was so much good energy coming out of that space between you.
Well, and she was not looking to have that conversation, nor was she.
Not at all.
So it wasn't like she was like, oh, hey, great to meet you. She was very, very defended, and, as she should be, for whatever reasons of her life, right? But it was deep. So anyway, grounded experiences and grounded ideas. Like I think what I am doing is just
emerged out of your observation of groups and participation in groups. No reading of books. I've never seen you read a book about group dynamics or group conflict.
I did. But wait. I did when I was doing my master's in social work. My focus was groups. So I did have to read things about groups during that time.
In your early 20s.
Yeah. But most of that time was studying groups was actually doing them. I had the opportunity to, be in internships that really gave me that experience of just doing it. So I for whatever reasons, my data collection is in the field.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty powerful, when you learn in that way. And I think many
what I've seen over the years, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Laurie.
Well, thank you, Sam. This was fun.
Yeah, it's good. And we'll be back 2 days from now, Friday afternoon at 3:00 for part 2. Yeah.
I'll be ready.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Hang on. That's going to be the ending, but you need to respond to something here really fast. Somebody said, but Laurie said that fairness is the goal. She values fairness and not the outcome. Is that?
Well, you know what? I'm not sure what the context is. So maybe I'll be going down the wrong path. But I think I was saying that when people know that the rules are fair, that they can then engage in a competition. I also think that that's true in a collaboration space as well. If you know, so for example, if you know that I, as your facilitator, are going to take your side, and I'm also going to take someone else's side, and I'm also going to take someone else's side, and you see that there will be fairness here. I'm not here to push a particular thought system. Then you can trust that process and you all can engage together. And so in that sense, fairness is the goal, just because then the group can create the outcome.
And the outcome will be what the outcome is.
And I think
it has to come from the group.
Yeah. And I think it tends to be more decent because people are being held to a certain kind of decency, because most people are decent. You know what I mean? That's what I
really are.
Experience.
Yeah, now they really are. Okay, well, actually, I'm glad we went back to that after we got to the end, and then I did what I so often do, Laurie, is I well, wait, one more thing. So It's inevitable that it happens here. So listen, thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking. I'm really very much looking forward to round 2 on Friday.
Thanks to Jeff and Elijah and Sam for making this happen, because we all had different parts in it.